Hello, I'm Renee. Welcome to the craft table. If you saw the video where I discussed my temperature quilt, then you know that I've been using the Applipops to make the circles that go on each block of my temperature quilt. So today I want to explain to you some tips and tricks on using the Applipops to make circles. For my temperature blocks, I've been appliquing circles onto 4-patch squares. And these Applipops have been making the job so much easier. My blocks will finish at 4 inches, so they're 4.5 inches unsewn, and I'm appliquing 2-inch circles onto my 4-patch. The set that I'm using is the 2-inch assembly line, and that means the set comes with enough circles to make 5 2-inch circles at once. That's why it's an assembly line. They do come in a variety set as well, but I like these since I know that my project is going to be calling for the same size circles. So for each circle, you're going to need 2 rings, and they're designed where the rings fit together and you have an inner ring and an outer ring. And basically, you take your fabric and you put the outer ring on top of the right side of the fabric, and then you place your inner ring on the inside. Trim, so you have your seam allowance. And for these 2-inch circles, I use the outer ring as my guide. Now, after I do this quick demo, I'm going to go over some other tips and tricks, but this is just the brief overview. Then you have your liquid starch. I use a paintbrush, and you're just going to brush that liquid starch on this, what's called the seam allowance of your circle. And then using your fingers, you want to coax that fabric towards the center, making sure you don't have any puckers along the outside edge. That will give you a smooth circle. Then you're going to use your iron to press that fabric towards the center. And you have to be very careful because these rings are steel, so they get very, very hot. Move this one out of the way. But the iron can also be used to work that fabric towards the center. And then you just give it a quick press from the top. You let it cool completely. This one's one I did before, so I'm going to demonstrate on this one. And then you take off the outer ring, pop out the inner ring, press down your seam a little bit with your fingers, and then give it another good press with your iron. And then again on the top. And there you have a perfect circle. So before I go over some of the different tips that I've learned in making these, I want to point out what I like about the assembly line sets. While one circle is cooling, you can be working on your others. And so you don't have to wait for that one to cool, take it out, and then do another one. So the assembly line sets come in all the same size circle, and then you can pick which set you want based on the project that you're working on. Back to the 2 rings, this is what I've found is very helpful. So each ring has a flat side and a beveled side. Whoops. Here's the outer ring. So it has a beveled side and it has a flat side. So depending on the thickness of the fabric and the type of fabric you're working on, you may want to flip to either have the flat side on top or the flat side down. Same thing with the ring. I found that having the flat side against my top side of the fabric, and then the flat side again on the inside of the fabric works the best. And you don't want it to sit completely flat. You want it to go in just a little bit on the top side. So it does take a little bit of practice and getting to know the fabric that you're working on, but it's a really quick learning curve. The other thing that I've found, when you're making smaller circles, you're going to want a smaller seam allowance. But I've been working with these 2-inch circles, and so I've found using the edge of that outer ring is the perfect width. The other tip that I will share is once I've trimmed around and I'm going to use the starch on the inside, I have it on my ironing surface. I feel like the less that I'm moving this ring around, the less chance I have of the ring separating and the fabric popping out. And again, you can practice with how much starch to use. At the beginning, I was hesitant to put much on there because even in regular patchwork, I don't use starch very often. But I've learned that the starch is really what helps in shaping your circle with your fingers before you iron it and keeping it flat. You want to push the fabric straight towards the center and not side to side. And the edge of your iron can help with that. But for instance, right now, I would not put my finger on that side because I've already put the iron on there and these rings are really hot. That is the one caveat that I will say. So you want to be really careful. You do not want to burn yourself. So while this one is cooling, I will go back to one of the ones that I've done before that I know is already cooled. And I pop out the rings, give it a good press from the back, flip it over, and press it from the top. And then this one is still cooling. So I've got this one already prepared and I'm going to come over and brush the starch. And the starch will not stain or stick onto your rings. So you don't have to worry about that because I don't know if you can see, but I have a little bit of starch that's kind of on the ring, but that's okay. It will kind of help when the fabric's going to cover it. So it just gives it a little bit of extra starch for one thing. probably don't need to press it as much as I am with my fingers. I just would rather have it this step done pretty well so I don't have to go back and do it again. And you, like I said, you don't want, the key to having the outside of your circle be smooth is to not have any puckers on this back part of the ring. And if you're worried about a certain area and you know that your ring is going to be hot, you can use the back of a stiletto or the back. Sometimes I use the back of my paintbrush to manipulate it a little bit. And once you're sure that the outer section is pressed towards the center, I give it a really good press from the top. So these are assembly line sets. I've got 5 that I can be working on. So while one is cooling, or a couple of them are cooling, I can be cutting other circles. Now, if you're working on a project that has different size circles, then the Pro Pack could be considered an assembly line pack as well, because you could use all those different shapes at once while you're working on the different sizes. So I'm just going to add these to my circles that I have. And then I have a stack of 4 patch squares. So when I know what the high temperature is for the day, I can choose the circle that I need, pin it on my 4 patch, applique it down, and then add it to my temperature quilt blocks. So I hope you found this Applipops tutorial helpful. In the description below, I have a link to a blog post where I go into a little bit more detail of using the Applipops and how I am using them in my temperature quilt. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button below and give us a like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Happy stitching!